Everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for this powerful conversation. My name is Tria Stanley, and I am moderating this discussion today. And to give a little bit of background about myself, I am the Northeast Regional Advocacy Manager with Community Justice.
Shout out to
Community Justice. And I am brought to this work, like many of you, because I understand how gun violence has impacted a person, a family, a community. And today we have Councilwoman Zanetta Everhart and Kimberly Rubio here, two powerhouse women who share similar stories of how gun violence has impacted them both as mothers. So just to start this conversation off, I would like to ground ourselves in what that day looked like for you both. Just 10 days apart, right? You both share similar experiences. So can you share your stories and share what that day looked like for you? Starting with Zanetta, can you tell us what May 14th looked like for you?
May 14th, 2022 was a Saturday. And in Buffalo, if you know Buffalo's weather, it was, May is odd. It's an odd month in Buffalo because sometimes it's snowing on May 14th and sometimes it's absolutely beautiful, and this happened to be a beautiful day. It was sunny, it was warm. I remember that morning I was up cleaning, right? It's Saturday, so I'm up cleaning. Zaire, my son, was getting ready for work. He worked at a local grocery store a few blocks from our house. And he usually walks to work, and we were in the kitchen. I remember he was making breakfast, and we were just chatting. And I was about to head out to go to another grocery store, and he left to go to work. And I left a little while later, and a couple hours later, I was in the grocery store just about to leave, and Zaire called me. And, when Zaire calls me, I answer the phone. I'm like, hey, kid, what's up? That's always how I answer the phone when he calls. And Zaire was hysterical. He was screaming. And Zaire doesn't scream. If he's a big guy, he's tall, but he's a gentle giant with a very soft voice. And so my stomach sank when he was screaming, and I knew something was wrong. And he was just like, Mom, get here now, I got shot. And I froze, and then I started screaming. And I ran out of the store, ran to the parking lot to my car. I was screaming at him, because I'm like, where on your body, right? I was just like, where on your body did you get shot? Because he was hysterical, but he was coherent, right? Like he was talking to me. And he said, I think it's my back. And so, I was just like, oh my goodness, universe, spare my child, just spare my child. That's all I kept saying. And I told him, I said, Zaire, I'm on my way. I was driving, I ran a million lights trying to get to him. And I called my mother. And I told because I knew my mom was at my house, and we live a few blocks away. And I said, Mom, Zaire is on the other line. He said he got shot, and she just lost it. And I said, just go to the grocery store. I can't get there that fast. I'm not that close. And so so I clicked back over to Zaire, and, by the time I got back on the other line with him, the ambulance was already there with him. And they had him in the ambulance, and they told me not to come to the scene. They said, go to the hospital. And that's what I did. I started making my way towards the hospital, and my mom called me back, and she said, she was hysterical. She said, there's bodies everywhere. She was like, they won't tell me where Zaire is. They won't give me any information. And then I told her, I said, Zaire is already on his way to the hospital, and meet me there. And, I got to the hospital, and it was chaos. Mm-hmm. So many families were there just waiting to hear, waiting to see what was happening with their family member. Everyone was there asking questions, and when I got in there, they they put me in this room, and they wouldn't let me see him. And I was hysterical, right? I was losing it. And I remember sitting on a cold floor. I just sat in a corner, and I just wanted to know. And then when the cop walked in, I got even more hysterical because I'm like, oh God, he's coming to tell me the worst. And he said, I was here when they brought Zaire in. He was talking. They have to check him out. They're taking him to get scans, and he was just like, you'll be able to see him soon. And then it was a little while later, and I was finally able to see him. And yeah, he was okay. I mean, it was a terrible scene. I mean, there was just blood everywhere in the hospital room. He was covered in blood. It was all in his hair. It was traumatic, yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, of course. And I just want to applaud you both for getting up here today and sharing your stories, because unfortunately I know a lot of parents can relate to what gun violence does to someone.
Unfortunately.
And Kimberly, that brings me to you, and sharing your story and what that day was like for you, and just grounding us in what that looked like for you.
So May 24th, 10 days after, Lexi had award ceremonies at Robb Elementary. We attended. They were at 10:30. She received the Good Citizen Award, and she received all A's, not unlike my girl, if you know her. We took pictures with her. I remember telling her to take a picture with Mr. Reyes. That was her teacher. She loved him, and she was nervous about leaving him and starting 5th grade. So I said, go take a picture with Mr. Reyes. And he said, she doesn't even like me. And she goes, yeah, I don't even like him. And then they both posed together and smiled. And that is the last photo we have of Lexi. We left, and I went back to work. Less than 30 minutes later, I heard on the scanner, I work at the Uvalde Leader News, so we have a dispatch scanner. And we heard that there was a shooting on a residential street near Robb Elementary, and later that followed with a lockdown. Again, not out of the norm because it is, in close proximity to this street. It's a blur as to when I realized that the situation had turned. I made my way to Robb Elementary, and it was just a sea of parents and chaos and cops. And they told us to go to the Civic Center. That's where we would be reuniting with our children. So go to the Civic Center. I had 2 children there that day. My son, he went home. We waited. It was bus after bus after bus, and Lexi wasn't on any of the buses. So we started checking the nearby hospitals. I had my dad drive about an hour and a half to the nearest major hospital where they were flying some of the children so that he could go check if she was there. The phone lines, it's chaotic. Nobody's getting through, so it was better to go in person. She wasn't there. She wasn't at our hospital. We started hearing rumors that, some of the children are at the funeral home. So I went to a funeral home. We talked to the director. She's not there. So at this point, we'd been getting rides from family and friends. And I said, I want to go back to Robb. And they were like, no, it's no use going back there. They're not going to tell you anything. And I said, I'm going back to Robb. So I took off my shoes. I ran across the highway, and I continued the mile to Robb Elementary. And I just sat at the curb. And looking back now, I think I knew as a mom, as her mom, that I was in the right place, because what I wanted was to be with my daughter, and my daughter was inside that classroom still. But eventually, a volunteer San Antonio firefighter said, we take you back to the Civic Center. That's where you'll be getting updates. You're not going to get anything here. So we did. A lot of other parents were waiting. Right before sunset, officers came, and they said they were going to move us somewhere quieter to wait, more private. And I remember my husband got up, immediately followed. But I looked to the woman next to me and I said, I don't want to go. Because I don't feel like I'm going to get the news I want following them. And I was right. They brought us to a private conference room from a local business, and they sat us down and they told us that Lexi was a victim, that she would never be coming home. My husband, I can still see it in my peripheral vision. His chair just goes back, hits the wall, he's up, he's yelling. And I just turned to my left and I told the woman next to me, I don't think I understand. And looking back, I still don't understand.
Yeah. Again, I want to thank you both for sharing your stories, and I just want for everyone to take a breath, because I know the conversation that we are having today is a powerful one, but it's an emotional one, right? So I just want everyone to take a breather. Please take care of yourselves while you're sitting through this. I see some tears happening. If you need to step out for a little bit, please do. But again, I just thank you all for being here. Yeah, go ahead.
You're amazing, Kim. I don't know how you do this advocacy with what you went through. It's nothing like what I went through. And I just want to honor you in this space, but I also want to make room in this space for my brother, Garnell Whitfield, who is also here from Buffalo. And he lost his mom on 5/14 in Buffalo. Garnell, I love you. And he's another person from Buffalo who is on a mission, right? And as we all are. And so I just want to make sure that I lift up Garnell in this space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to anyone else in the crowd that also may be dealing with grief, right? Grieving a loved one. We're wrapping our arms around you in this conversation. And that brings us to the next question, right? When we're talking about this conversation, we're talking about grief. We're talking about grieving, not just individually, but in our families and our communities, right? Because these are two incidents that have shaken a community. So I would just like you both to speak about what that process and journey looked like for you, what it still looks like for you, your family, your community. Just take a moment to really talk about that. And Kimberly, I would like to toss it over to you first.
Okay. I think grief can't happen until you've accepted what's happened. Personally, I'm not there yet. I choose to stay busy. I think I realized that very early on. I didn't want another mom to feel what I was feeling, and I wanted to honor Lexi because if you knew her, and I wish that the world had had the chance to know her, she deserved to make her own impact herself. And it's a tragedy that that opportunity was taken from her, but I've decided that I want to do that for her and with her. So she is with me everywhere I go. For my children and my family, we're still struggling. My children are very close, and I've seen how each of them has struggled in their own grief, and it is extremely difficult to try to be there for them and meet those individual needs because they are very different. Yeah. Some need to talk about Lexi, some need to pretend this didn't happen, and I have a son who was at Rob, and we barely had the conversation recently on a walk where I asked him if one day he would share with me what that day looked like for him. He's 10 now, he's Lexi's age now. And he said, "Oh, you never asked me." Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I wanted to take your lead. I wanted to be respectful. I didn't want to have a conversation or push a conversation before you were ready. Mm-hmm. And he said he understood, and when he was, he would tell me. So it's just extremely difficult. And as for the community, we all lost something that day. Whether it was a loved one or a sense of security, that was taken from everybody. So there is a lot of anger, a lot of misplaced anger and division and a lot of tension. And I hope one day we can be a community that reflects the 21 individuals lost, because we deserve that.
Yeah. And I like that you shared like the reality of grief, right?
Yeah.
That like it's something that you're still understanding for yourself, and then also how it impacts your family as well. And that brings me to you, Zanetta. As you said earlier, the story is different. However, what happened at TOPS impacted you, your family, but also your community. So can you share what that journey of grief looks like?
Yeah, it's daily, right? Like, it's constant, right? Because Zaire survived, right? But what does that really look like? There are days where, he doesn't sleep. And so if he's not sleeping, I'm not sleeping, because now I hear him and he's up and it's 2:30 in the morning. And, he's still in therapy, right? Over 2 years later. But he deals with survivor's guilt, right? One of the first conversations that he had in therapy, which was literally a week after 5/14 happened, was, well, why did I survive? All these black people died, but I'm the only black one who lived. That was one of the first conversations that he had in therapy. And how do you, as a mother, right? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? You can tell your kid, constantly that they're amazing and they're supposed to be here, and, there's a reason why they're here. But does that make him feel better? You don't know. I mean, I really think that this is going to be a long battle for Zaire, right? It just is. I don't know how he reconciles this. I can't fix it, right? Which makes me feel bad. I can't make this go away. I'll never be able to erase the fact that someone tried to kill my kid because he's black. I can't take that out of his head, unfortunately. So yeah, it is a daily struggle, and for us, it's, the east side of Buffalo to me has always been beautiful, right? It has always been a beautiful place. But being in the community now, it's like we all have this lump that we're carrying on the east side, and it's like we don't have nowhere to put it. We just literally walk around with it in our hand, and it's like, it's here. We hug each other, right? We come together, but we all got our hand with this thing right there. And so it's, grief and healing has been different for a lot of people in the community. Again, it's daily. I'm still not, I haven't accepted it either, right? And I haven't accepted it because, when you think about it, it's like 2022, right? People are still out here trying to kill black people just because they're living, right? Like, how do you just deal with that, right? And so I don't know when I'll be able to accept that it happened. I haven't accepted it yet. I've just been keeping busy, working through it, trying to do things to make the community better, to make people feel better. So that's how I'm dealing with it.
Yeah, and I think you both touched on very important points of that grief looks differently, again, not only for you, but for your families and for your community. And that has to take up space, right? We all grieve differently. And we have to understand that in order to understand how to show up for one another in this space. So thank you both for speaking to that and that very extreme emotion at times. Grief can be extreme. right? But I also want to take the time to honor how you both have stood up in your grief. And both of you have continued to do the work. And last year, you both decided to run for office, and really turning that pain into something powerful. And I would like you both to just share your why and why that mattered to you to stand up in those moments. And Zanetta, if I could just toss it back to you to just speak about your why.
There was many whys. Why I ran for office. The first one being is that I'm from the neighborhood that this shooting took place in, right? I've experienced all of the good, the bad, the ugly of the east side of Buffalo. That's where I was born, that's where I was raised, that's where I raised my kid. That's where my family lives. And so, my family has been touched by numerous, obstacles, ups and downs, and our own traumas long before 5/14. And so, my initial why was, this is my community. I live here. I know the issues. I've experienced those issues myself, right? And then, as an adult in career, I also had the experience to do this, right? And so, and then it became, it really was me running it was a community effort, right? It was the block club leaders in the community, because I previously worked for Senator Tim Kennedy for 8 years, and I worked on the ground in the neighborhoods with the people. And, my campaign became their campaign. They were running the block club. I had 80-year-old women running my campaign, right? Like, it was the block club leaders. It was the people in the neighborhoods who saw something in me that I definitely didn't see. For years, they were asking me to run and run. You should run, you should run. And I was like, absolutely never, right? Like, no, I'm not. I work for a politician. Like, I don't want to be a politician. And then, after 5/14, traveling back and forth to Washington, D.C., testifying before Congress, meeting with the president and the vice president, and, doing all of these things, I was like, you know what? People are watching Buffalo right now. This is an opportunity. And so I took it. I took that opportunity. So that was my why. Yeah, those were my whys, I should say.
Yeah. And I want to congratulate you again on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, just coming out of that and standing up in, and I just want to congratulate you.
Thank you.
And Kimberly, I want to turn it over to you, and your why and what that looked like for you, and then coming out of it, right?
Yeah, so again, a lot of division in the community, and I recognized, as those of us who lost someone understand, that it wasn't going to get better, that we were never going to forget the 21. And a lot of community members wanted to. And that's where I saw the division, and I thought, well, who better to be mayor of Uvalde and bring those two sides together, because everybody has a story to tell, a place at the table. And I wanted us to work together to heal, to move forward in a way that recognized and carried with the 21. But I will say that I also recognize that in Uvalde, it's always the same groups of people that run for office and that lead. And I also recognize that it was that failed leadership that led to the events of May 24th. From something like a school board, why weren't there better protections up? Why weren't doors locked? Why didn't we have fences up? To a city council that hires Uvalde police departments that stood by and did do nothing. So I wanted to make a difference. Unfortunately, I was not successful, but I'm not going to give up. I do have plans for the future, and
Snaps. Let's go.
yeah, I always joke that they're going to wish that they just kept me in a small town in Uvalde.
No, And I love that, right? Because like you said, you're not going to give up, and you shouldn't. So we're going to look forward to that next race, in that win, right? But even with that, you didn't stop there. You created your own nonprofit, right? And it's called Lives Robbed.
Yes.
Correct? So can you just tell us like what that means to you, what that work looks like?
Absolutely. So in the beginning, we noticed same groups of faces, going to speak before Congress, to meet with representatives. We're flying to DC, we're going to Austin, and we thought, you know what, we're stronger together. So it is for moms. We all lost someone that day, and we are working together to honor our children with action and to make a difference. And joining the gun violence prevention space, we were new, we weren't sure, so we definitely are thankful for a lot of the organizations that took our hands, that held our hands and helped guide us, and the Olivers are here. We were welcomed in a place where we were seen and we weren't judged, and we're hopeful that together we can make a difference, that we can end gun violence in this country, because it is doable. We just have to come together.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you can snap it up for that. Snap it up for that. Because you're right. This work isn't easy work. I don't think any of us get up in this space expecting this work to be easy. We know it's not. But I hear it all the time that this is hard work.
It is.
And that's exactly what it takes to continue on. And you both just put your hearts on your sleeves and continue to fight every single day. And that brings me to you, Zanetta. In your position, you just recently introduced a resolution in Buffalo that calls for an Office of Gun Violence Prevention in Buffalo. Can you share a little bit about that and why it's so important to have an office set up in Buffalo?
Yeah, so I've been working on this for a while. So, November I won my election, and I thank you. Yes, snaps. So yes, I'm the councilwoman representing the Maston district in the city of Buffalo, and I knew the first piece of legislation I was going to do was going to be about gun violence. I knew that. I didn't know what it was going to be. Yeah. I had all of these things written out. I was ready. I had a plan, and I knew that that's where I wanted to make my mark. And so, I was sworn in January, and 5 months later, my first piece of legislation was to create the Office of Gun Violence and Prevention in the city of Buffalo, because the White House started it, right? I've met with them, we're really close with Greg, and he's doing amazing, amazing work through the White House. And, part of the reason why they started that office was because of what happened in Buffalo, right? And Buffalo wasn't even, at the table, right? So I'm like, where is the leadership in that, right? Like, the White House is literally laying the groundwork for this gun violence stuff because of what happened on 5/14. Because when we think about shootings, right, and we think about mass shootings, a lot of times it's all about the criminal aspect, right? All we're talking about is police, fire. We're going to make sure that, someone's going to get arrested. We're going to recover a gun, and that's it. Yeah. But where is the human response to gun violence, right? There is no human response to it. And, we have these shootings all the time. We just recently, last weekend, there was like 6 people shot in the city of Buffalo. We had a 3-year-old die a few weeks ago. A 14-year-old died a few weeks before that. And it's like, there's no coordinated response for those families, right? Like, that is a level of grief that I'll never understand, right? I can empathize with it, but I'll never understand it. And what are we doing for those families, right? Are we deploying counselors and therapists? What type of interventions are happening for these babies? Just last week, a 6-year-old witnessed someone get shot and killed right in front of him. Like, what resources was deployed to that baby to make sure that he's okay? Right? And that's what this office does, right? That is what they're doing through the White House with this office, and that's what we have to do on the local level, right? We have to step into those spaces and not just talk about it, not just have random community meetings after a shooting, and then after that, no one talks about it anymore, right? It's just gone. No, we have to continue the conversation because that's how you weed it out. And so I'm really, really, excited to introduce this legislation. In a couple weeks, we will definitely get it passed. And I'm ready to do the work. We have to do more coordinated work around gun violence as it relates to mass shootings, but also the day-to-day shootings that happen in the city of Buffalo and cities across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you talk about like the human resources, right? We're not just statistics, we're not just numbers. These are individuals, these are families, these are communities that are feeling the impacts of gun violence. And I know that we spoke about the grief aspect, so I would like to speak about hope. Right? Because I believe in order to continue forward doing this work, you have to have a sense of hope.
Yeah.
So what is the hope that you all have in this space? Whether it's personally, with your families, in the community, in the work that you do, just regarding gun violence, what keeps you hopeful? And Kimberly, I would like to toss it over to you for that first.
So for me, I've already lost so much. I don't get my daughter back. My hope is that her name is tied to more than just this tragedy, more than the pain. I want her to be remembered for the efforts I put in for change. And I've always said it, like, her legacy will be change, and mine will be honoring her with action. I want to see an end to gun violence. I want, on a federal level, on a state level, on a local level, for people to wake up.
Yeah.
Hope. My number, as a mom, right, my number one hope is that, like Kim said, like, I want people to see Zaire in a different light because he's such an amazing kid, and he's just, but when people see him in the community, that's all they see. Right? They immediately come up to him, they hug him, and it's beautiful, right? And it's wonderful to have that community support. But my hope is that, he creates a space where people won't just bring that up to him, right? And he's already doing it, and I'm so proud of him. And, for the larger community, my hope is just that that we take back our community, right? It just hurts, like I just mentioned, like this 3-year-old that died from gun violence a few weeks ago in Buffalo. That was heartbreaking. Yeah. Like, that tore me up. I was just like, I just want our community to understand that we have to be in charge of it, right? And that it takes not just, elected leaders. It takes everyday people, the people on the ground. I need them to understand that they have the power. They don't realize that the power is theirs. Yeah. It belongs to them. I'm only here because of them, right? And I want that for our community because I think that when people take back their power, they create the change, right, that they want to see. And that's what I want for our community. But there's another part to that, which is, racism, right? We have to, when it comes to the shooting in Buffalo, we have to make space for that. And understand that is why that mass shooting took place. And we have to talk about domestic terrorism, and we have to talk about white nationalists, and we have to go after them, and we have to keep putting them on Front Street, right? And, one of the things that Zaire and I did after 5/14 was we started Zanette and Zaire's book club. And so we collect books that teach kids about diversity acceptance, inclusion, all of those things. And we literally just go to community centers, we go to schools, we pass them out to kids because it starts with our babies, right? Our babies are one day going to grow up. We don't want to raise a generation of racists. Right. After 5/14, I read the terrorist manifesto. Right. I was obsessing over it, and I read it, and he was completely misinformed, miseducated. Right. We have to educate our kids around racism. We have to talk to them about the different types of people in the world. We can't raise our kids in a bubble and then one day send them to college on a college campus with a bunch of people that they've never seen in person, right? They only know the stories of colored people from TV, right? That's not okay, right? We have to teach our babies about that. So, my hope, I want to end to gun violence. I want to end to racism. I want communities to understand their power. I have a lot of hopes. A lot of hopes.
No, in this work, it pays to be hopeful.
Yeah.
It really does. And as we wrap this up, and before we toss it over the questions, in just one or two words, is there anything else that, like, as mothers, as survivors, as pivotal pieces of your communities, right? Is there anything else that you would like to share with the crowd before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I'd like to just share a little bit about Lexi.
Yeah.
So Lexi was 10 years old when she was taken from us. She was intelligent, athletic. She played softball and basketball, and she had hopes of playing volleyball when she got to junior high. She was loving, such a sweet girl. She, at a young age, liked to talk about politics. She would have loved to meet you. We loved talking about females in positions of power, and she was also a big fan of AOC and Kamala Harris.
Yes, come on.
We called her our little budding feminist, and she hated Greg Abbott. So I just wanted to share that a little bit of her with you all, so y'all can take her with you as well.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, these mass shootings for me, I like to give messages to the community about just like the human aspect of it, because I know my brother Garnell sitting here, we've had these conversations, but give grace to these families, please, give grace, because it's heavy. It is heavy. They are carrying something really, really heavy. And a lot of people, they don't get it, right? They don't get it. I mean, I'm going to be honest. Some people have been nasty after, these mass shootings. And I like to just remind people that, they're humans. We're humans. These families are humans. They are dealing with something that none of us can understand. They are dealing with something that I don't understand. Right? I don't even understand it because I got to keep my kid, right? And so for me, it's always about lifting them up and giving them grace. Because, when I first thought about doing this panel, Kim was the first person I reached out to. And I was like, because we had met a couple times before, and just, sitting in senators' offices and sitting next to her and hearing her advocate for her baby, right? Like, America, like, my message is for the country. Just give people grace who have gone through these things, please. Like, this is a pain that you have no idea. You have no idea what that pain is. So just give people grace.
No. And again, I just want to take the time to honor you both and thank you both for just not only being here today, but just being in this fight. And I know I do, and on behalf of this room, I know that we're all here with you. We're stepping beside you every step of the way, and just thank you both. So we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. If there are any questions in the crowd, please raise your hand. And
Taria, can I real quick? I
Yeah,
do
go
want to
ahead.
make sure that we lift up our gun violence prevention organizations that are in the room. I don't know everyone in the room, so if you are one of those organizations, if you could just give us a little wave. I know Noah is here, March for Our Lives, Moms Demand Action. Shout out, yes, please give it up.
show yourselves love.
All of them.
Yes.
Oh, come on now. I love it. I love it. A lot of these organizations I know have reached out to me, to Garnell, to Kim after these mass shootings, and they've been on the ground ready. They've been helping. I reached out to Noah. I reached out to Taria after I introduced my legislation, and they were like on it. They were like, we got you. We're going to send it out on social media. So I definitely want to lift up all of those gun violence prevention organizations because y'all help this movement continue. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. You all deserve to honor yourselves as well,
Yeah.
right? Because again, we're going to say this work is not easy. It takes a lot of heart. It takes a lot of patience. And it takes a lot of just stripping away that fear, right? And just showing up for ourselves, showing up for people next to us, showing up for our communities. So every step of the way, make sure that you're honoring yourselves and just really taking care of yourselves in this work, y'all, please.
Yeah.
We cannot pour into this work. We cannot pour into this community unless we're pouring into ourselves. So please make sure you're doing that. And with that being said, I would like to toss it over to anyone who may have a question. Are there any questions in the room today?
He's running.
We're getting you.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Okay. Good morning. So I'm Delegate Bernice Miracle North. I'm actually a state legislator here in the state of Maryland. Represent Montgomery County, is about 35 minutes from here. So yes, thank you for all the Marylanders in the house. Just thank you for being in this space. As a legislator, I am fighting for folks like you at the state level, fighting for survivors of gun violence. I recently introduced legislation to impose a tax on guns and ammunition to fund, thank you. Thank you for the trauma of gun violence survivors, the Maryland Trauma Fund, and I need your help on the state level too. One thing that I noticed in my preparation for the legislation was I had a lot of professionals, but I didn't have your stories. The only story I had was my own. My father was shot in 2020, October 2020, and so when I hear you guys talking about the healing process, it takes a long time. It takes a long time. I mean, I'm saying this now, but 3 years later, I probably will be in tears. So it takes a long time. So thank you for, again, being in this space. But with that, tell me what you're doing at the state levels, if anything, to help us do what we can at the federal levels, taking a long time to try to get done with helping survivors like yourselves.
Yeah. It really has just been the advocacy, right? Going to the senators and the assembly members, meeting with them. Like I said, I used to work for a senator. He's now a congressman. But having those conversations, I mean, after 514, you know, New York State has some of the toughest gun laws in the country, but they went and made it tougher. Right, but I definitely want to hear about that piece of legislation, so I'm gonna need you to send me that. But it really is the advocacy. That's what I've been doing. I could, you know, when I introduced my piece of legislation, I sent it off to everybody. Right, all of our local elected leaders in the area, in the assembly, in the Senate, I sent it to everybody. I'm like, because it has to be coordinated, right? It can't just be the city of Buffalo doing this, right? It has to be Rochester and Syracuse and all the way up to 90, right? All the way up to New York City. And so we have to make sure that these are coordinated efforts. And I think that that's the most important part of that. Yeah. Yeah.
And if I can add to that really quickly, just because in the work that I do with community justice, I actually work a lot in Maryland. And I am also co-lead of the Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence Coalition, and it's power in numbers.
Yep.
So I would love to speak with you more about that because After the last session, when we went up for funding and got turned down, we came back with the governor's office and was like, we got something else for y'all. And that was now what has passed is the official Office of Gun Violence for the state of Maryland, right? And that's major because Maryland has never had anything like that. So we can do it, it's possible. I would definitely love to connect with you to discuss more of like what that looks like on a local level. Are there any other questions in the room?
You know, if the forum is on gun violence, I will be there. And I've never been a victim of it. No one in my family has been a victim of it. But just because it doesn't happen to me doesn't mean I'm not supposed to care. Now, I would like to see the people in this room and the people who have been trying to fight gun violence, can we try to manipulate the word liberal? We're all here today because, well, we're progressives and we're liberals. But when you come to think about it, we don't think that anybody or everybody should be allowed to have a gun. Only responsible people should be allowed to have guns. The right-wingers, the conservatives, they think that anybody is allowed to have a gun. We're obligated to let a mentally ill person have an assault weapon because of the Second Amendment. Isn't it about time that we turned the tables on those bastards and started calling them the liberals? Because basically, when you think a mentally ill person we're obligated to let such a person have an assault weapon, they are bigger libtards than any of us could ever be, if you think about it. So can't we manipulate the word liberal and really turn the tables on those bastards? Because we live with gun violence and we're all sick of it.
I'll say that I was hearing you mention state level is difficult. In Texas, we work hard at the federal level because the state level is almost impossible. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, it's time to have a conversation where we come to the table and talk about from the human aspect. And I think that's what we're missing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that as it relates to the guns, I mean, I think you just started it, right? Changing the way we think about liberals. He started it, and that's the way it starts. It starts in a room like this, having the conversation, and, next thing you know, yeah, we're calling them the liberals, right?
There's stickers made.
There you go. All we need is some stickers on a T-shirt. Listen, any campaign could be made out of any space, but it is true. I mean, I don't have anything against the Second Amendment. I think if you want a gun, you should get a gun, but I don't think, again, that people who have, issues going on, and I don't think everyone should have a gun, right? People scream around Buffalo everywhere we go, right? Oh, they're gonna take our guns, and it's like, nobody's trying to take your gun, but you shouldn't be able to walk the streets with an AR-15. I'm just saying, like, it really is that simple to me. I don't know, like, I feel like people think we live in like movie land or something, right? Like there are no zombie apocalypse about to happen, right? Like you don't need an AR-15. No one needs that. And so, yeah, I'm with you. Let's get some T-shirts made.
Yes, and with that, I would just like to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Zanetta and Kimberly, for just sharing your stories, allowing us to just be in this space with you both. And please, if there are any other questions for anyone up here, please just find us in the room. We are definitely always happy and honored to hold space with you all and have these conversations. I just want to thank you all again and just give it up for yourselves for showing up today.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Always beautiful, always.
This was like the most impactful.